When you're rounding fractions and mixed numbers to the nearest unit, you want to use the following guidelines. If your numerator is almost as large as your denominator, then you're going to round up to the next whole number. For example, if you have a number like 7/8, 7, your numerator, is almost as big as 8, so you would round that up to the next whole number, which is 1. In the situation 2 and 9/10, 9 is almost as big as 10, so that would round up to 3. If your numerator is about half of your denominator, then the fraction is going to round to 1/2. Again, for example, 3/5. 3 is almost half of 5. 2.5 or 2.5 is exactly half of 5. So 3 is very close to that, so this would get rounded to half. When we look at this with our whole number and our fraction, look at the fraction part. 6 is almost half of 11. So this would get rounded to a half, so we would have 4.5. And the last rule that we use when it comes to rounding is if your numerator is much smaller than your denominator, then you're going to round down to the next whole number. So 1/7. 1 is much, much smaller than 7, so we would round that down to 0. 2 and 3/16. 3 is much smaller than 16. Half of 16 would be 8. 3 is much, much smaller than that, so we can again see we would round down. Now let's put this into practice. Okay, 2 and 5/6. So remember, the first thing I want to do is look at my fraction part. This numerator is almost as big as this denominator, so that means we're going to round up. We're going to round this to the next whole, so 2 and 5/6 would round to 3. 3/7. 3/7. If I look at that, half of 7 is 3.5. So this is pretty close to being half, so this fraction would round to half. 4 and 2/11. Well, my numerator is much, much smaller than my denominator, so because it's much smaller, we're going to round this down, and we're going to round it down to the next whole number, which would just be 4. Okay, a couple more examples here. 7/12. 5 and 7/12. Well, if I look at this fraction part, 7/12 is almost half. 6/12 would be half. So this part of the problem, the fraction, is about half, so it's going to round to 5 and 1/2. 1/8. 1, as my numerator, is much, much smaller than my denominator. So this is going to round down, and because there's no whole number with it when I round this down, it actually rounds all the way down to 0. And my last example that I have here, 1 and 7/9. When I look at this fraction, 7/9, my numerator is almost as big as my denominator, which means I'm going to round up, which means this whole number is going to go up, and this will round to a whole number as 2.